Hey there, deep divers. Ready to jump into another deep dive with us?
Always excited to dive in.
Okay, so this week's deep dive centers around the statement we found. All fluctuations are super dimensions fiction.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Right.
Yeah,
Sounds like a sci-fi novel or something.
it really does.
We found this in a bunch of different places.
Mm.
Philosophy, spirituality,
Uh-huh.
even a little bit of theoretical physics.
Wow.
So consider this your crash course in bending reality,
Okay.
or at least bending how we think about it.
I like it.
I'm excited about this one.
Me too. It's fascinating how this one statement
Yeah,
can bring together so many different fields.
right.
And it makes you wonder,
Mm,
is there something deeper
yeah.
about the nature of reality that
Yeah.
we're just starting to grasp?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm no expert on quantum mechanics or anything like that,
Sure.
but when I hear the word fluctuations, I immediately think of things that are constantly changing,
Mm.
like the stock market,
Okay.
or even like my mood swings.
Oh, yeah.
Am I on the right track with that?
You're absolutely right to think about change. Fluctuations exist on all levels. So you can think about ripples in a pond.
Okay.
The rise and fall of civilizations,
Mm-hmm.
or even the fleeting thoughts that
Wow.
pop into your head. This statement is basically saying that all of these changes, no matter how big or small, they might not be the whole story.
Okay, so we've got change happening everywhere we look.
Mhm.
But what about this super dimension thing? Is that like some secret level of reality that only like enlightened beings can
It
access?
definitely pushes us to think outside the box,
Okay.
beyond the dimensions we can easily perceive.
Okay.
So one way to picture it is to imagine a flat sheet of paper.
Okay.
That's our everyday reality.
Uh-huh.
Now imagine that sheet existing in a much larger
Yeah.
three-dimensional space.
Okay.
That space is like the superdimension. It includes our reality,
Hmm.
but isn't limited to it.
So we're like those flatlanders from geometry class, totally oblivious to a whole other dimension surrounding us.
Yeah,
And the fluctuations we see are just the shadows of something happening in that bigger space.
that's a great analogy. It
Yeah.
really highlights how limited
Yeah.
our perception might be.
Hmm.
What we experience as change could be just surface level, a ripple on a much larger pond.
Okay, this is already making my head spin, but I'm hooked.
Aha, good.
So tell me, what are some of the ways these sources interpret the superdimension?
Okay,
Is there like one definitive explanation?
that's the exciting part.
Hmm.
There isn't just one answer.
Okay.
Some sources describe it as a higher spatial dimension, like in string theory,
Hmm.
where our reality is just a tiny slice
Oh, wow.
of a much vaster universe.
Okay.
Others point to something more abstract, like an unchanging realm of perfect forms.
Wait, are you saying there's like a perfect blueprint for everything? Like a cosmic IKEA catalog
Yeah.
with like the ideal version of every chair? Yeah,
Every flower,
right.
even every thought.
That's one interpretation.
Wow.
And in that view,
Yeah.
the superdimension holds the true essence of things,
Okay.
while the fluctuations we see are just imperfect copies.
Wow. That's a pretty radical way to look at things.
It is.
So is that the only way to understand this super dimension?
Oh, no.
Are there other possibilities?
Oh, yeah, there are plenty more.
Okay.
Some sources suggest it's a universal consciousness, a
Hmm.
mind,
Okay.
that encompasses all of reality,
Okay.
with our individual experiences being like fleeting thoughts within that mind.
Hold on. Are we saying our entire universe
Mm.
is just a thought bubble
Yeah,
in some cosmic brain?
it's a mind-blowing concept.
That is mind-blowing. It really makes you wonder
Right.
what that cosmic mind is thinking about.
It does, doesn't it? And there are even interpretations that describe the superdimension as a cosmic creative force.
Okay. With the fluctuations being its artistic expressions, imagine the universe as a vast canvas,
Okay, yeah.
constantly being painted and repainted by this force.
So instead of just random chaos,
Hmm.
everything we see, even the things that seem bad or destructive,
Yeah.
are actually part of some grand artistic vision?
It's a very poetic way to think about it.
Yeah, it is. And does that lead to some pretty interesting questions about
It
the
does.
nature of beauty, meaning, and even suffering?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get a grip on this super dimension concept.
Okay.
At least enough to make my brain tingle a little bit.
Good.
But we still haven't touched on that word fiction.
Right.
Does this mean our whole world is basically fake news?
Not necessarily.
Okay,
Fiction here isn't really about truth or falsehood in a literal sense.
okay,
Instead, it points to how these fluctuations might not be the fundamental reality.
okay.
Think of it like watching a movie.
Mm-hmm.
The characters and events on the screen.
Yeah.
They're real within the context of the film,
Okay.
but they ultimately stem from the mind of the filmmaker.
So it's like saying the fluctuations are real to us because we're experiencing them,
Yeah.
but they're not the whole story. There's a deeper level,
Uh-huh.
the super dimension, that's
Yes.
creating or projecting those
You
fluctuations.
got it. And depending on how you interpret the superdimension,
Yeah.
that act of creation or projection
Okay.
could take many forms.
Mm-hmm.
Some sources draw parallels with the concept of Maya
Mm.
from Eastern philosophies,
Okay.
where the perceived world is seen as a kind of illusion or veil
Mm.
over a more fundamental truth.
So it's like we're mistaking the movie for reality,
Exactly.
getting so engrossed in the plot that we forget it's all just a story being told.
Yes. And then there's the idea that fiction could refer to a constructed reality,
Okay.
where the superdimension
Mm.
is generating or simulating the fluctuations
Mm.
we experience.
Okay, now we're getting into Matrix territory.
Uh-huh.
So if our world is a simulation, the fluctuations are like the program of events,
Uh-huh.
real within the simulation,
Yeah.
but ultimately created by something outside of it.
You're getting the hang of this. And this leads to some really fascinating questions
Yeah.
about the nature of our reality and whether we can ever truly know what lies beyond the simulation,
Whoa.
if there even is a beyond.
Okay, now that's a rabbit hole I'm not sure I'm ready to go down just
It's
yet.
a deep one.
But I'm definitely intrigued by all these different interpretations of fiction. Are there any others we should explore?
There are a couple more,
Okay.
and they offer some unique perspectives on how the superdimension might be creating these fluctuations.
Okay.
But before we jump into those,
Yeah.
I think it's time to move on to part 2 of this deep dive.
All right.
We'll unpack those final interpretations, and then we can start exploring what all of this means for you, the listener.
Awesome. All right, deep divers, we're just getting started. Make sure to tune in for part 2,
Yes.
where we continue our exploration of the superdimensions fiction
Definitely.
and how it might just change the way you view the world.
It might.
All right, so we're back
We are.
for part 2 of our deep dive into all fluctuation in our superdimensions fiction. So my brain is officially doing somersaults after that last segment.
I can imagine. It's a concept that really challenges how we think about things.
It does, but that's what makes these deep dives so fun, right?
Exactly. We get to stretch our imaginations a bit.
Yeah.
Explore some possibilities that maybe we wouldn't think about every day.
Yeah, exactly. So before we went to break, we were talking about the different ways to interpret that idea of fiction. We covered the illusion analogy and the simulated reality concept.
Right.
Are there any other interpretations of fiction that could shed some light on how these fluctuations relate to the superdimension?
There are a couple more I think we should touch on.
Okay.
One interpretation suggests that fiction could refer to a narrative
Okay.
or a story. Imagine the superdimension as a master storyteller, and the fluctuations we experience are like plot points
Okay.
in this grand cosmic tale.
So it's like our lives are chapters in a
Right.
book written by the superdimension.
Exactly.
And all the events,
No.
both good and bad,
Right.
they're all part of this unfolding narrative.
They are. It can be a very comforting thought
It can.
for a lot of people, especially when you're going through something challenging.
Yeah, for sure. It makes even the tough times feel a little more meaningful, like they're part of a larger story.
It's a nice way to reframe it. It suggests that even these seemingly random
Yeah.
or chaotic events in our lives, they might actually have a place in the grand scheme of things.
Okay, yeah, I can see how that would be a powerful way to reframe things when you're going through something really difficult. But does that mean that we have no control over our own stories?
Right.
Are we just characters following a script that's already been written by the superdimension?
Right. Well, this is where we bump into the question of free will,
Right.
which is a debate that's been going on for centuries.
Yeah, of course. It's the ultimate question.
It is. This interpretation doesn't necessarily negate free will,
Okay.
but it does suggest that our choices might be influenced
Okay.
or shaped by forces beyond our conscious awareness.
Okay, so maybe we're not completely in the driver's seat. It's more like we're co-writing the story with the superdimension, like
Yeah.
adding our own unique twists and turns to the narratives.
That's a good way to put it. It means we still have agency
Okay.
within that larger story, the ability to make choices that influence how our chapter unfolds.
I like that. It makes me feel a little less like a puppet
Yeah.
and more like a participant in this cosmic play.
That's a good way to think about it. Okay, so we've got the narrative interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
What's the final perspective on fiction that we should explore?
All right, lay it on me.
So this last one focuses on the idea of emergent properties.
Hmm.
Okay, so imagine a flock of birds flying in formation.
Okay.
The patterns they create are real.
Yeah.
They're beautiful, but they come from those simple interactions between each bird
Right.
following basic rules.
So like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly.
Individual birds, they might not be consciously creating the patterns, but their actions collectively, they create something beautiful and complex.
Exactly. And in this view, the fluctuations we experience, those could be seen as emergent properties arising from the interplay of fundamental elements or laws within the superdimension. So they're real phenomena, but they're not the fundamental building blocks of reality.
Okay, I see how that ties back to the idea of fiction. So the fluctuations are real in the sense that we experience them.
Right.
But they're not the ultimate reality. They're like patterns in the sand, constantly shifting and changing,
Yeah.
formed by the underlying forces of the superdimension.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It brings us to a crucial question.
Hmm.
If all these changes, all
Yeah.
these fluctuations,
Uh-huh.
are ultimately expressions of something deeper,
Yeah.
something more fundamental,
Okay.
what does that mean for us, for our lives, for our understanding of the world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. So we've explored these different interpretations of the superdimension
Yeah.
and fiction, but how do we actually apply these ideas to our everyday lives?
Yeah, how do we use these ideas
Yeah.
to navigate all the ups and downs,
Right.
the constant fluctuations of
Right.
our own experiences?
Well, I think one of the most powerful takeaways
Yeah.
is the idea of impermanence.
Okay.
No matter what interpretation you kind of lean towards,
Yeah.
it seems like they all point to change being a part of reality.
Right, so instead of resisting change or trying to hold on to things
Yeah.
that are fleeting by nature,
Uh-huh.
we should learn to embrace the flow of life, accept that change is just a part of it, and maybe even find beauty in that constant transformation.
Exactly. Many spiritual traditions emphasize the importance of letting go of attachment to things that are impermanent.
Okay.
It's not about becoming passive
Okay.
or indifferent, but rather recognizing that change is a natural part of life,
Sure. Yeah.
like the seasons changing or the tides ebbing and flowing.
Yeah. I can see how that perspective could be really liberating.
It is.
Instead of getting stressed out about every little change, we can learn to kind of ride the waves, so to speak,
Yeah.
and find peace in the midst of all the flux.
It's a shift in mindset that can take time and practice,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
but it can be incredibly transformative.
Mm.
It allows us to be more present,
Yeah.
more adaptable,
Uh-huh.
and more resilient in the face of challenges.
I think that's something we could all benefit from in today's world, that's for sure. So impermanence is one key takeaway. What else can we learn from this idea that all fluctuations are superdimensions fiction?
Another crucial implication, and one that we kind of touched on before, is this question of free will.
Right, right.
If our lives are unfolding in this larger context
Yeah.
of the superdimension,
Uh-huh.
does that mean our choices are already made for us? Are we just playing out a script that's already been written?
Right. It's a question that can cause some existential dread.
It can.
Like if everything is already decided, what's the point of even trying?
It's a valid concern, but I think it's important to remember
Yeah.
that even within a fictional narrative, characters still make choices
Okay.
that have consequences.
Yeah.
Think of your favorite novel or movie.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be very interesting if the characters were just passively
Right.
following a predetermined script.
Oh, absolutely not. The best stories
Yeah.
are the ones where the characters, they struggle.
Yes.
They face difficult choices.
Uh-huh.
Their actions have a real impact
Exactly.
on the outcome.
It's those moments of decision, of agency,
Yeah.
that make the story interesting.
Totally. So if we apply that to our own lives, it suggests that even if we're operating within a larger narrative, our choices still matter.
They do. We have the ability to shape the story,
Okay.
to influence the direction of our lives, even if we're not in complete control of all the external factors.
Right. So it's like we're co-creating the story
Yeah.
with the superdimension.
Yeah.
We have a say in how our chapter unfolds.
Yes.
Even if we're not writing the whole book.
Exactly. It allows us to acknowledge the influence of forces beyond our control,
Right.
while still recognizing our own agency and responsibility.
This is starting to feel less like a deterministic, pre-programmed existence
Right.
and more like a collaborative, improvisational dance.
Yes, I love that.
We're working with the superdimension, riffing off the existing themes,
Yeah.
but we get to add our own flair to the performance.
You do. And that's a really powerful way to think about it.
It is.
Because it allows us to acknowledge
Yeah.
that there is this dynamic interplay between structure and freedom.
Okay.
between that larger context
Right.
and our individual choices.
This is giving me a whole new way to think about approaching challenges.
Hmm.
Instead of feeling like a victim of circumstance,
Yeah,
I can see myself as a participant in a grand cosmic dance,
that's beautiful.
contributing my own moves to the, ever-evolving choreography.
I love that analogy. And it's an empowering way to approach life
It is.
because it allows us to find meaning and purpose in our actions, even amid the uncertainty and the constant change.
Okay, so we've covered impermanence and free will.
Uh-huh.
What other key takeaways can we extract from this idea that all fluctuations are superdimensions fiction?
Another really important one is the question of meaning.
Okay.
If our lives are part of a bigger story, a cosmic narrative,
Uh-huh.
does that mean there's some inherent purpose to our existence?
That's a big one.
It is. Are we all part of some grand design
Right now, that's a question that's been pondered by philosophers.
for ages?
Yeah, theologians for ages.
Yes.
Is there a reason we're here, a specific role we're meant to play in the grand scheme of things, or is it all just a big cosmic accident with no meaning?
Right. So that's a question that each individual ultimately has to answer for themselves.
Okay.
But the different interpretations of the superdimension offer a range of perspectives on this.
Okay.
So let's unpack that a little.
Yeah, let's unpack it.
Some interpretations, like the idea of a cosmic creative force or a universal consciousness, they suggest that there might be an inherent purpose
Okay.
behind the unfolding of reality. In this view, our lives might be seen as expressions
Okay.
of that purpose,
Okay.
contributing to a larger design that we might not fully comprehend.
So it's like we're all playing a role in a cosmic play.
Yes,
And even if we don't know the entire script, our individual performances still matter.
they do.
And they contribute to the overall beauty and meaning of the production.
Exactly. And this perspective can be a source of comfort and inspiration,
Yeah.
knowing that our lives have significance,
Right.
even if we don't always understand that bigger picture.
Yeah, I can see how that would be really reassuring, especially when you're going through really hard times.
Absolutely.
Knowing that even those little, seemingly insignificant moments still have a place in the grand scheme of things.
They do, but what about those interpretations that don't necessarily suggest a predetermined purpose? Like the idea of our world as a simulation or a projection of a higher dimension.
Yeah.
How do we find meaning if there's no inherent design
Right.
or intention behind how reality is unfolding?
Yeah, if we're just characters in a simulation or shadows on a cave wall,
Right.
does that mean that our lives are ultimately meaningless?
Not necessarily. Even within a simulated reality or a projected world, there's still room for meaning and purpose.
Okay.
It might not be imposed from outside,
Okay.
but rather something that we create through our choices and actions.
So it's like we're given a blank canvas,
Yeah.
and we have the freedom to paint our own masterpiece.
Yes, you got it. So the meaning isn't predetermined, but something that we cultivate
Okay.
through our experiences and interactions with the world.
Okay. I'm really liking how this idea of superdimensions fiction is like both humbling and empowering at the same time.
It is.
It reminds us that we're part of something much bigger.
Yeah.
But it also acknowledges our own agency and the potential to create meaning and purpose in our lives.
Exactly. And that brings us to another really crucial aspect of this whole idea.
Yeah.
The significance of our actions.
Right. Okay.
If everything is ultimately fiction, do our choices really matter? Are we just playing out a script that's already been written?
Right, right. That leads to some moral ambiguity.
It does.
Like, if there are no ultimate consequences to our actions,
Yeah.
do we have any real responsibility for how we behave?
Well, it's a question that's been debated for centuries.
Of course, yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that even in a fictional narrative, the actions of the characters still have consequences.
Okay.
They impact the other characters.
You're right.
They shape the storyline. And ultimately, they contribute to the overall meaning of the story.
Yeah, like think about a villain in a movie. Their actions might be part of the script, but they still have a real impact.
They do.
On the hero's journey and the overall message of the film.
They do. And in the same way,
Yeah.
our actions, however small they may seem, can have ripple effects that extend far beyond ourselves.
Okay.
So even if we're operating within this superdimensions fiction, our choices still matter.
Okay.
They impact the people around us.
Yeah.
They shape the world we live in.
Right.
And they contribute to this ongoing narrative
Mm.
of the universe.
So it's like we're all contributing to the cosmic story, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah, I like that.
Each choice we make,
Mm.
each action we take,
Uh-huh.
adds a brushstroke to this grand canvas of existence.
I love that image. It highlights how interconnected everything is.
Yeah.
We're all part of this vast unfolding story, and our actions have the power to make a difference,
Okay.
even if we don't understand the scope of our influence.
Okay, this is a lot to take in. I'm feeling humbled and inspired at the same time
Good.
by this idea that we're all co-creators of this super dimensions fiction.
I like that.
Is there anything else you think that our listeners should consider at this point?
I think it's really important to acknowledge
Mm.
that accepting this idea that all fluctuations are superdimensions fiction
Yeah.
can be a really challenging process. It requires us to question some deeply held beliefs about the nature of reality,
Sure.
our sense of control, even the meaning of life.
Yeah, no, it's definitely mind-bending.
It is.
I can see how that could be unsettling for some people.
It can be. I think the most important thing is to approach this concept with curiosity
Okay.
and an open mind. It's not about blindly accepting everything we've talked about,
Okay.
but rather allowing these ideas to challenge your assumptions
Mm.
and expand your perspective.
So it's like an invitation to explore some new possibilities,
Yeah.
stretch our imaginations, be open to the mystery and wonder of existence.
I love that. And remember, this is just a framework for understanding reality. It's not about finding the one right answer.
Okay.
It's about expanding our awareness
Yeah,
and exploring different perspectives.
I love that. It's about the journey of discovery,
Yeah.
not about arriving at some final destination.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right, deep divers, we're just getting started.
We are.
Make sure to tune in for part 3,
Yes,
where we continue our exploration of the superdimensions fiction
we will.
and delve into some of the ethical considerations of this mind-blowing concept.
Yes, it should be a good one.
Welcome back, deep divers. We are tackling the final part of All Fluctuations, our superdimensions fiction.
It's been quite the deep dive already. Over the last 2 parts, we've been exploring what this could mean,
Yeah.
diving into the superdimension, and how everything we see might be a kind of fiction
Right.
coming from it.
And we've been looking at how this statement, despite sounding super abstract,
Yeah,
could actually affect how we view our daily lives.
absolutely.
Right, from accepting change to questioning free will,
Yeah.
and even how we find meaning.
Totally.
It's been wild.
It has.
But before we wrap things up,
Mhm.
we've got one last big question to tackle.
Okay.
You let our listeners hanging with this thought. If all fluctuations are part of this superdimensions fiction,
Uh-huh.
does that change how we view good and evil,
Mm.
right and wrong?
Right.
Do those even matter anymore?
Right.
Or are they part of the fiction? Ugh.
Now we're getting into the deep philosophical questions.
I know, right?
This is something that's puzzled thinkers for centuries.
Yeah,
There's really no easy answer.
right.
But looking at it through the lens of the superdimension can offer some interesting insights.
Okay, I'm ready to dive into this ethical abyss.
All right, let's do it.
Where do we even begin with this?
Well, let's start with the interpretations of the superdimension that suggest it represents some kind of ultimate reality.
Okay,
So think Plato's realm of forms,
okay.
or the idea of a universal consciousness in those views.
Yeah,
Maybe concepts like good and evil exist as these absolute, unchanging truths within that higher realm.
so it's like there's a cosmic rule book out there
Yeah.
that defines right and wrong,
Uh-huh.
and our human laws are just trying to catch up.
That's one way to think about it.
Okay,
It aligns with that idea of natural law,
okay,
or divine command theory,
okay.
that morality is grounded in something beyond what humans came up with.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about those other interpretations? Like if we're living in a simulation, or if reality is a projection from a higher dimension,
Uh-huh.
well, does that change the whole ethics game?
That certainly raises some interesting possibilities.
Yeah.
If you think about a simulated reality,
Okay.
maybe the concepts of good and evil are programmed into the system by whoever created it.
Okay.
Like, it's just part of the rules of the game.
So it's like those user agreements we all click accept on without actually reading.
Exactly.
We agree to play by the rules of the simulation even if we don't know what they are.
Yeah, and in that case, right and wrong would be relative to that specific simulation.
Okay.
So what's considered good in one simulated world
Yeah.
might be totally different in another.
Whoa, that's a trippy thought. It's like moral relativism, but on a cosmic scale.
It is.
But if that's the case, how do we even make ethical decisions?
Wait.
Do we just throw out our moral compasses
Mhm.
and go with the flow?
Well, not necessarily. Even if there's no absolute universal code of ethics, we can still develop our own moral frameworks
Okay.
based on things like compassion,
Okay.
empathy, the well-being of ourselves and others.
So even if the rule book is up for debate, we can still choose to play the game
Yeah,
in a way that aligns with our own sense of what's right.
exactly. We can still strive to be the best versions of ourselves,
Okay.
even if the definition of best might be different,
Okay.
depending on the context.
Okay, that makes me feel a bit better.
Yeah.
It's like saying we're not off the hook ethically,
Right.
even if the rules are a bit fuzzy.
Right.
We still have to make choices that align with our values.
Yeah.
And that hopefully make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
But I am curious about those interpretations that suggest morality emerges naturally from the superdimension. How does that work?
Think about the way that cooperation and altruism evolved in nature.
Okay.
These behaviors,
Yeah.
which we generally think of as good,
Yeah.
they emerged as survival strategies that benefited the group
Okay.
as a whole.
So it's like saying morality isn't something that's imposed from the outside,
Yeah,
but rather something that arises organically from the interactions within the superdimension.
exactly.
Okay.
And in that case, good and evil might not be these fixed categories, but rather more fluid,
Okay.
evolving concepts that change depending on the context
Yeah.
and the needs of the system.
Okay, so we've got all these different perspectives on good and evil,
Yeah.
how they relate to superdimensions fiction. But how does any of this actually apply to, like, everyday life?
Right.
How are we supposed to handle all those ethically messy situations that pop up if we're accepting that all fluctuations are superdimensions fiction?
Yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all answer.
It's just not, yeah.
But I think one of the most important things to remember is the importance of being compassionate
Okay.
and empathetic.
I like that.
It's like, even if the rules of the game are a bit uncertain,
Yeah.
we can still choose to play it with kindness
Yeah.
and understanding.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this actually goes back to the idea of interconnectedness that we've talked about.
Yeah.
If everything is ultimately part of the same superdimensions fiction,
Yeah.
then we're all connected on a deep level.
So even if we don't know the exact rules of the game,
Right.
we can still choose to play in a way that benefits the whole team.
Exactly.
Okay.
When we act with compassion and empathy,
Yeah.
we're helping to create a more harmonious
Ah.
and positive reality
Yeah.
for everyone.
Okay, that's a nice thought.
Yeah, and ultimately, that might be the most important thing we can take away from this whole deep dive.
Wow. Okay, I think we've reached the end of our journey into the superdimensions fiction. It's been quite a ride.
It has been a wild ride.
I'm sure our listeners have got their minds spinning with new ideas,
Yeah.
new perspectives.
I hope so.
Yeah, and remember, reality is a lot more fluid and mysterious than we often give it credit for.
It is.
So keep questioning, keep exploring.
Yeah.
And who knows what amazing discoveries you might make along the way.
That's the fun part.
It is.
All right, until next time, deep divers.
He's diving deep.